You ever sit down at the end of the month, open your bank app, and just stare at the number? Not because it's shocking, not because you made some crazy purchase you regret, but because you genuinely don't understand how it got that low. You try to rewind your memory like a movie. Okay, I paid rent, bought food, maybe went out once or twice. Nothing feels extreme, nothing feels irresponsible, and yet somehow the money is gone. And the worst part isn't even the number. It's that quiet feeling in the back of your mind, like you're doing something wrong, but you can't quite point to what it is. That was me. Every single month felt like I was pouring water into a bucket with a hole in it. And no matter how much I earned, it never stayed. And I used to think the problem was simple. I just need to make more money. But the truth is, it wasn't that simple at all. Oh, reframe the problem. Most people think money disappears because they're bad with money. They think it's about discipline, or laziness, or lack of knowledge. But that's not usually what's happening. Because if you actually look at your life, you're probably not careless. You think before you spend. You feel guilty sometimes. You even try to cut back. And yet, the result doesn't change. That's because the real problem isn't just what you spend. It's how your life is structured around money. There's this invisible system most of us are living in, where money doesn't leave in one big, obvious decision. It leaves quietly, in small, reasonable, justifiable moments. And because each decision feels normal, you never question the system as a whole. So instead of fixing the system, you blame yourself. You say things like, I need to be more disciplined. But discipline doesn't fix a system that's designed to drain you slowly. You can't out-discipline something you don't fully see. And I didn't realize that for a long time. I thought my problem was that I wasn't trying hard enough, when really, I was trying inside a system that made losing money feel normal. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine someone earning a decent monthly income. Not rich, not struggling, just somewhere in the middle. Let's call him Daniel. At the beginning of the month, Daniel feels okay. Salary just came in. Balance looks healthy. There's a sense of relief. For a moment, he feels in control. Then life starts happening. Rent goes out first. That one is obvious. Expected. Then groceries, also expected. Transport, bills, data, electricity. Nothing surprising yet. Then come the small things. He's tired after work one day, so he orders food instead of cooking. It feels justified. He tells himself, I deserve this. It's been a long day. A few days later, a friend invites him out. He hesitates for a second, but then says yes, because saying no feels like missing out. And it's not even that expensive, right? Then there's a random online purchase, something small, something useful. It doesn't feel like a big deal, and that's the pattern. Nothing feels like a mistake. Nothing feels reckless. Every decision makes sense in the moment. But here's what Daniel doesn't see. Each of those decisions isn't happening in isolation. They're happening inside a pattern of emotional spending. Not emotional in the dramatic sense, but subtle. Spending to relieve stress. Spending to feel normal. Spending to stay connected. Spending to avoid discomfort. And when you stack those small decisions over 30 days, they create a result that feels confusing. Because you can't point to a single bad choice, so your brain doesn't learn anything. You just feel stuck. Now let me take you to a completely different situation. A woman named Sarah. She earns less than Daniel. On paper, her situation is tighter. But somehow, at the end of the month, she still has a small amount left. Not a lot, but something. And it's not because she's more disciplined. It's because she became aware of something most people ignore. She realized that money doesn't disappear in big moments. It disappears in patterns. So instead of asking, what should I cut? She started asking, what pattern is draining me? And that changed everything. She noticed that every time she felt overwhelmed, she spent. Not a lot, just enough to feel a little relief. A snack here, a ride instead of walking, a small treat. Individually, these things were harmless. But emotionally, they were connected. They were her way of coping. So instead of trying to stop spending completely, she changed the pattern. On days she felt overwhelmed, she gave herself alternatives. Sometimes that meant resting instead of going out. Sometimes it meant planning her meals so she wouldn't default to expensive options. Sometimes it meant simply noticing the feeling instead of reacting to it. And slowly, the leaks started closing. Not because she forced herself, but because she understood herself. That's the difference most people miss. Money problems are rarely just math problems. They're behavior problems. And behavior is driven by emotion, environment, and habits, not logic. You can know exactly what to do and still not do it. Because in the moment, your brain isn't thinking about your bank account. It's thinking about how you feel right now. Let me give you another example. There's a guy named Michael. He's very aware of his spending, tracks everything, uses apps. On paper, he's doing everything right. But he still ends every month with almost nothing left. And it frustrates him, because he feels like he's doing the work. But here's what was happening. Michael built a lifestyle that expanded with his income. Every time he earned more, his life adjusted quietly. Better apartment, better food, more convenience. Not dramatically, just slightly better each time. And because the upgrades were gradual, they felt normal, not like luxury. So when he looked at his spending, nothing seemed excessive. But his baseline cost of living had increased, without him fully realizing it. This is what people mean when they say money just disappears. It's not disappearing. It's being absorbed by a life that keeps expanding to meet your income. And unless you consciously stop that expansion, it never stops on its own. That was one of the hardest things for me to accept, because it meant the problem wasn't just what I bought. It was the life I was slowly building without noticing. A life where every increase in income came with an increase in expectations. Better experiences, more comfort, less inconvenience. And again, none of it felt wrong. But together, it left me with nothing, month after month. The shift didn't happen when I learned a new budgeting method. It didn't happen when I tried to cut everything out. It happened when I asked a different question. Instead of asking, "Where is my money going?" I started asking, "What role is money playing in my life?" And that question changes everything, because it forces you to look beyond transactions. It makes you see patterns. I realized I wasn't just spending money. I was using money to manage my energy. When I was tired, I spent. When I was bored, I spent. When I felt behind in life, I spent to feel like I was keeping up. Money wasn't the problem. It was the tool I was using to deal with other problems. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. Because now, every time I reached for my wallet, there was a moment of awareness. Not guilt, just awareness. Why am I doing this right now? And sometimes the answer was still, because I want to. And that was fine. But other times, the answer was uncomfortable, because I don't want to feel this. And in those moments, I had a choice. Not a perfect choice, but a real one. And that's when things started to change. Not overnight, but steadily. Because now I wasn't fighting my spending. I was understanding it. And when you understand something, you can actually change it. So if you're in that place right now, where your money keeps disappearing and you don't fully understand why, I don't think the answer is to suddenly become extremely strict. That usually doesn't last. Instead, start by slowing things down. Not your life, just your awareness. The next time you spend money, pause for a second. Not to judge yourself, just to notice. Ask yourself quietly, what's driving this? Sometimes it'll be practical. Other times, it won't. And that's okay, because you're not trying to be perfect. You're trying to see clearly. Then, look at your month as a whole. Not just the numbers, but the patterns. Where does your money tend to go when you're stressed? Where does it go when you're trying to relax? Where does it go when you're around certain people? You'll start to see connections. And once you see them, you can adjust them. Not by cutting everything, but by changing the environment around those moments. Maybe you plan your meals better so you're not forced into expensive choices when you're tired. Maybe you set small limits for social spending so you don't feel restricted. But also, don't lose control. Maybe you accept that some spending is emotional, and you account for it instead of pretending it doesn't exist. Because the goal isn't to eliminate spending. It's to make your spending intentional. There's also something else that helped me, and it's simple, but not easy. I stopped upgrading my life every time my income increased. That doesn't mean I stayed stuck. It just means I became more selective. Instead of asking, what can I improve? I started asking, what actually matters to me? And that question filters a lot of unnecessary spending. Because not everything that feels like an upgrade actually improves your life. Some things just increase your expenses. Quietly. Permanently. And finally, I gave my money a direction. Not a strict plan, just a sense of purpose. Because money without direction will always find a way to disappear. It gets absorbed into daily life. But when it has a purpose, even a small one, it starts to behave differently. And so do you. If you're being honest with yourself, you probably don't need a completely new system. You don't need to become a different person. You just need to see what's already happening a little more clearly. Because the truth is, your money isn't disappearing randomly. It's following patterns. Patterns built from your habits, your environment, your emotions, and your daily life. And once you start noticing those patterns, things begin to shift. Not perfectly, not instantly, but gradually. You start making slightly different decisions. You start pausing a little more. You start choosing instead of reacting. And over time, those small changes add up. Not into some dramatic transformation, but into something much more valuable. Stability, clarity, a quiet sense that your money is no longer controlling you, and you're not constantly wondering where it went. Just a feeling that things are making more sense. And maybe that's enough, because progress with money isn't about getting everything right. It's about getting a little more aware, a little more intentional, 1 month at a time.